morning, everyone. In my quiet corner again. Numbers 23, verse 19 says, God is not man that he should lie, nor son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken and will not fulfill it? Sure. First of all, I very rarely wander into the pages of Numbers because often there's these long lists of names, and they're very important because they they denote genealogy, and it's how people have proven um, the connection, the truth of what God spoke, because of the connection of, for instance, Jesus and David. You know, Jesus is from the line of David, and so if you run through the genealogy, you can actually trace the history. It's very important to the Jewish people. Genealogy is very important because it runs through the female of the family, and your Jewish heritage is then acknowledged in this way. So Numbers, it's these long lists of names, but there are such wonderful gems of scripture in Numbers. The Jabez prayer, for instance, this long list of names, and then there's this kind of window of absolute beautiful hope. Where God promises Jabez, whose name, and that's also another thing, it's what you name your children is important. Jabez, whose name means pain, actually. Um, God promises expanded territories and great wealth, and Jabez gets this. And this little gem of scripture is, God is not man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or he has spoken, or has he spoken, and will not fulfill it? And that's the one thing. That's why lying is such an important. God is so against lying, because it's so. When we become Christians, we forge ourselves, and we try and mold ourselves around God and around Christ. And the one thing he's never done is made a promise and not fulfilled it. He's not ever um, said that he's going to do something and not done it. And that's what we would see as the good and the bad thing. So if he has said these are sin and these are the consequences, and somebody sins and there's consequence, people are like, oh, how can God be um so cruel and brutal, or whatever they say about God? And you think, but in the Bible it says if you do these things, then there's a consequence to your sin. Um, and so you have to pay. And then they go, yeah, but we are followers of Christ, and he paid for our sin already. Yes, but there's still kind of a natural consequence to your sin. And if you follow Christ, you're supposed to be following him so closely that you try and move away from sin. And when there's a natural consequence. So if you hit somebody and they hit you back, you know, you hit them and they hit you back. And here it says in this scripture, he does not lie, because he's not the Son of Man. And he does not change his mind. So when he has promised a nation, he will save them from the Egyptians. It could take a few hundred years, but you will be saved from the Egyptians. When he's promised a nation the Messiah, it took a few thousand years, but then Jesus was born and he died and he rose again. So he does what he says he's going to do. And when he speaks, you can know that that will happen. There will be a fulfillment of what he has spoken. God knows us, and he knows our nature, and he knows what he's promising. And further than that, God does not lie. And we should be following on that. We should be striving towards that. God is not man. We are man, but we must become as close to God as possible. And so in Numbers, it's all about God's promises and God's understanding of man and God's love for man. And that's where the genealogies come from. These are the long lines. He promised Abram a long line. He promised David that a king would come from the line of David. Um, all those kinds of things. He promised and fulfilled every promise. So you can go find the promises in the Bible and you can put your foot on them and say, I belong to that promise. That's a very interesting thing, because Jesus is our biggest promise, and we can see evidence of Jesus in our lives when we walk with him every day of our lives. With that, think on that. Have a lovely day, and we'll speak again tomorrow.